Shocking scenes inside Windsor Palace. The Queen Consort's own son caught sneaking into a restricted royal archive, and what the royal guard found inside left everyone speechless. A hidden crate, a forged pass, and a secret tape with the late Queen's voice that was never meant to be heard. This truth could rewrite royal history forever. Stay till the end, like this video, and subscribe now for the full story. The corridors beneath Windsor Castle did not echo. They were built to silence even sound itself. Thick limestone walls, padded thresholds, and reinforced doors designed to guard not just artifacts but legacies. Down here, history was sealed, classified, and watched over by one man who believed loyalty was more than obedience. Sergeant Edric Hail, 21 years in service to the Crown, stood at the entrance of the lower archive wing. His uniform was pressed sharp, his bearing straight, his eyes alert. This floor was not part of public record. It was legacy protocol, a private vault that held the late Queen's personal letters, tapes, and confidential estate documents. Only 2 living individuals were cleared to enter, the reigning monarch and the chief royal archivist. Everyone else, even royalty by blood, required written clearance through Parliament. At precisely 6:12 a.m., the biometric terminal chirped. A request flashed across the screen. Temporary access, Level 3 escort request. Thomas Parker, Queen Consort's son. Edric frowned. The request was wrong in 4 ways. Level 3 clearance did not apply to this floor. No escort had been logged. No scheduled audit was due for another 3 months. And most importantly, Thomas Parker had no clearance for any restricted archival section. He keyed his radio. Archive to Central. Confirm access request for Section 7B under the name Thomas Parker. A brief pause. Then the reply came through static. Negative. No authorized entries today? Repeat. No access cleared. Edric cut the line. His gaze hardened. The elevator at the far end of the corridor began to descend, its quiet hum cutting through the sterile air. Someone was coming down. When the doors opened, Thomas Parker, immaculately dressed, stepped out. His hair was still damp from a morning shower, his tie loosened in casual confidence. Behind him stood a silent aide in black, pushing a crate labeled Archival Transport, Priority. The crate was official-looking, but too new. Its labels were unscuffed, the barcodes freshly printed. Thomas gave a charming half-smile. Sergeant, perfect timing. We just need a few minutes. Biographer's request. Pulling personal correspondences for restoration. Edric remained motionless. Clearance Level 3 is not sufficient. You are attempting to enter a Level 1 archive. Thomas blinked, amused. Temporary authorization. Directly approved. You may want to check your system updates. Edric's tone did not waver. There have been no updates. Central confirms no scheduled activity. The aide stiffened, gripping the crate handle tighter. Thomas exhaled, impatient. These systems always lag behind the real world. I have verbal permission from Her Majesty herself. Verbal permission does not override sealed classification protocols, Edric said calmly. Thomas laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. You forget who funds your uniform, Sergeant. Edric stepped forward, precise but unthreatening. And you forget what my uniform represents. Step away from the door. No crate or document passes this checkpoint without clearance. Thomas's smile faltered. He pulled a thin card from his jacket pocket, a forged biometric pass. Try this. He tapped the card to the scanner. A red light blinked. Access denied. The aide's eyes darted toward the corridor. Thomas's confidence thinned. Step back from the panel, Edric said, his voice lower now, controlled. This area is under preservation surveillance. Every action is recorded. You are attempting unauthorized access to state property. Thomas bristled. You are overreacting. You are a ceremonial guard, not intelligence. Edric's gaze did not move. I am a royal guard assigned to defend protocol integrity. And that means this door does not open for anyone who lies to it. The tension between them thickened like fog. The air seemed to hum with restrained authority. Then Edric's comm crackled again. Hail, we are detecting motion from your sector. Do you require assistance? He pressed the transmitter. Stand by. Situation under control. Thomas raised his chin. You will regret this. I can have your post stripped before sunrise. Then I will regret it with honor, Edric replied evenly. He stepped to the crate, scanning its tag. The numbers did not match any active shipment. He crouched, tapped the panel, and heard a faint mechanical click inside. His eyes narrowed. "Open it," he said. Thomas scoffed. "You have no right." Edric's hand moved to his sidearm, not drawn, just resting on the holster. "I said open it." The aide looked at Thomas. After a long pause, Thomas sighed, waving a hand. "Fine, if this makes you feel important." The aide unlatched the lid. Inside lay sealed audio reels, a leather folder, and a single cassette labeled in handwritten ink. Windsor, private record, Queen's voice. Edric's chest tightened. The label was unmistakable, the late Queen's handwriting. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. Thomas's charm vanished. "That is family material." "No, sir," Edric said, stepping closer. "That is the Crown's property, and the Crown's law does not belong to families." "It belongs to history," the aide froze. The silence between them stretched. Edric reached for his radio. "Central, confirm secondary lockdown. Unauthorized materials recovered under," but before he could finish, Thomas lunged forward, slamming the crate shut. "Enough," he shouted. "You have no idea what you are protecting." Edric's eyes were steady. "Then enlighten me," Thomas's voice dropped to a whisper. "That tape changes everything." And in that moment, the guard understood. This was not an intrusion for greed. It was an attempt to erase something that should never have been hidden. The corridors held their breath as two worlds, duty and blood, faced each other in silence. The crate's echo lingered long after the lid slammed shut. For a moment, the underground corridor felt smaller, as if the limestone walls themselves were listening. Sergeant Edric Hail stood motionless, every muscle trained by years of restraint. He did not speak first, he waited. In silence, truth always moved closer to the surface. Thomas Parker adjusted his cuffs with forced calm. "You have overstepped, Sergeant. You will return that crate and pretend this never happened." Edric's eyes remained fixed on the crate. "You entered a sealed wing with a forged pass, accompanied by a civilian aide carrying unauthorized material." "You will remain until verified," Thomas scoffed. "Verified by whom? You? A guard with a medal and no authority?" "By the record," Edric replied steadily. "The record never lies." He stepped closer. "Open the crate again." The aide hesitated, glancing between them. "Sir, maybe we should—" "Do not move," Thomas snapped. But Edric was already lowering his palm toward the lock. He pressed the inspection override, a soundless release built for emergency checks. The lid rose again. The tape lay on top of a leather-bound folder embossed with the initials ER2, the late Queen's cipher. Beneath it were two sealed envelopes and a document marked "For Parliament custody only." None of it belonged outside this vault. Edric reached for the tape, turning it under the light. The handwritten label read, "Legacy Series 22, Private Audio, Restricted." He glanced up. "Where did you find this?" Thomas's expression flickered between arrogance and panic. "You do not need to know that." "Then I will assume theft until proven otherwise," Edric said. "You assume too much," Thomas retorted. "You do not understand what you are guarding, Sergeant. This tape contains something that could destroy the image of the Crown you serve." Edric's jaw tightened. "Then it is the Crown's duty to decide what truth it can bear, not yours." Thomas exhaled sharply. "You have no idea how naive that sounds." Edric activated his radio again. "Archive security to Central. I am initiating Containment Protocol Alpha. Possible breach of Royal Legacy files." But before the reply came, Thomas lunged forward and snatched the tape, stepping back toward the elevator. "Stop!" Edric commanded. Thomas held the tape up. "You think this uniform gives you the right to guard lies? Do you know what is on here? A confession, recorded by the Queen herself, naming the real reason the succession changed before she passed." Edric's heart stopped for half a second, but his posture did not break. "Put the tape down. She questioned everything, even her heir," Thomas said bitterly. "My mother knew. She covered it before it reached the council. That is why this place exists, to hide her voice." The aide stepped backward, clearly torn between obedience and fear. Edric's tone sharpened. "If you walk out with that tape, you carry state property under criminal charge." "You will not reach the elevator!" Thomas's voice cracked with fury. "Then you are protecting deceit!" Edric took a step forward. "No. I am protecting her legacy from being twisted by either side. A single breath passed between them, long, cold, electric. Thomas lowered the tape slightly, his voice quieter now. You think truth is safe here? Locked behind stone walls. Truth is not preserved by silence. It is preserved by those who dare to hear it. Edric held his gaze. Then let us hear it properly. He extended his hand, not in command, but in invitation. After a long hesitation, Thomas slowly placed the tape into Edric's gloved palm. Play it, he said. But when you hear what she says, you will never look at that crown the same way again. In the central control room, lights dimmed automatically as Edric inserted the cassette into the playback terminal. The machine whirred softly, the reels turning with a faint hiss. A moment later, the voice that filled the chamber froze them all in place. It was the late Queen's voice, measured. Gentle, unmistakably hers. If you are hearing this, my words were not meant for ceremony. They are meant for conscience. The crown has always endured, not because of its heirs, but because of its honesty. I have seen power lose its purpose when truth bends. Should my passing be used to rewrite what is right, let those who serve remember. Silence may guard walls, but courage guards nations. The voice paused briefly, the sound of a page turning faintly audible. To my successor, honor does not pass by blood alone. It passes by integrity, and to the guard who keeps these halls, know this. If ever the line between loyalty and truth divides, choose truth. For that is the true duty of the crown. The tape ended. No one spoke. Even Thomas, defiant minutes earlier, stood pale and trembling. Edric turned off the machine, the echo of her final words still haunting the air. He turned toward Thomas, his voice calm but unwavering. She was not condemning. She was guiding. You see betrayal. I see instruction. Thomas stared at the ground. You do not understand. If this goes public, it changes everything. Maybe it should, Edric said quietly. He lifted the tape carefully, placing it back into its case. This recording will be handed to Parliament as the late Queen intended. It will not be erased, and it will not be used for personal defense. Thomas's voice lowered, almost pleading. You think the palace will allow that? Edric stepped closer, his eyes firm. The palace is built on men like me, sir. Men who will. And with that, he keyed his radio once more. Central, this is Sergeant Hail. Secure the wing. I am escorting unauthorized personnel to the registry for questioning. Thomas's aide swallowed hard. The illusion of privilege had vanished. The air now belonged to the guard. As they walked toward the exit, the corridors felt heavier. Not because of what was found, but because of what it meant. The truth had spoken through the voice of a queen long gone, and a soldier still standing. When they reached the elevator, Thomas turned slightly. You are making enemies, Sergeant, Edric replied. Only among those who fear what she stood for. The doors closed. The descent began, but above them, the world was already stirring, because that recording, once sealed in silence, was about to reach ears it was never meant to. By sunrise, the voice of the late Queen had already left the underground chamber, and nothing in Windsor would ever feel the same again. The recording was no longer just an artifact. It had become a living question, echoing through the palace corridors, asking what the monarchy truly stood for when no one was watching. Sergeant Edric Hail stood outside the debriefing office, his uniform immaculate, but his eyes shadowed by what he had heard. He had escorted Thomas Parker and the aide upstairs under official supervision. Now both men waited behind separate glass doors under watch. Above them, unseen but very present, the Queen Consort's private office glowed faintly through the frosted glass. Rumor had already spread. The senior guards whispered fragments. Something found in the vaults, the Queen's voice. A sealed confession. The Royal Communications Wing was in crisis mode. Edric was called into the council chamber at exactly 9:30. Inside, the air was heavy with perfume, paper, and politics. Queen Camilla sat at the head of the table, her composure strained but precise. Around her sat the chief archivist, the legal secretary, and Colonel Davenport, the guard commander who had once trained Edric himself. Sergeant Hail, Camilla began, her tone polished. I have read your report. You intercepted my son attempting unauthorized access to a restricted section. Yes, Your Majesty, Edric replied. voice level. You then proceeded to open a classified container and play a recording without royal authorization. Yes, ma'am. You realize what you did could be considered an act of treason. Edric did not flinch. I followed the protocol written by the late Queen herself, Your Majesty. The file was classified under Legacy Code 7, guarded by direct royal oath. That means in her absence it must be heard by a witness of rank, not hidden from one. Camilla's eyes narrowed. You justify insubordination with interpretation? I justify duty with truth, Edric said simply. The silence that followed was sharp. Colonel Davenport cleared his throat carefully. Your Majesty, if I may. The sergeant acted within the preservation clause. The file was recorded by the late Queen. It carries her own instruction to the guard. I have verified this myself. Camilla's composure cracked for just a second. Then you have all heard it? Davenport hesitated. Yes, ma'am. And with respect. It changes things. Camilla rose from her seat, walking slowly toward the window overlooking the courtyard. The morning light cut across her face, soft but unmerciful. You think that tape was truth? I think it was timing. My son was never meant to hear it. That voice, it was her last weapon. Edric's voice carried gently. It was not a weapon, ma'am. It was a warning, Camilla turned sharply. To whom? To those who believe loyalty means silence, he answered. For a long time, no one moved. The ticking of the antique clock filled the void between them. Finally, Camilla spoke again, her tone quieter. My son said the tape could destroy us. Do you agree? No, ma'am, Edric said. It could define you. The people no longer fear the crown, they question it. And questions, when answered with honesty, build trust again. Camilla studied him for several seconds, then nodded toward the archivist. Leave us, she ordered. The others exited silently until only Edric and the Queen remained. She sat down again, hands folded, her expression unreadable. You have been in service long enough to know what happens to those who interfere with royal affairs. I have, he replied, and yet you continue. Yes, Your Majesty. She regarded him for a moment longer, then leaned forward. I want to hear it again. The recording, alone, Edric blinked, surprised but silent. She gestured toward the door. Bring it. And Sergeant, no cameras! An hour later, deep inside the private chamber, the old players spun once more. The room filled again with that unmistakable voice, steady, calm, full of grace. If you are hearing this, I have gone beyond the power that kept me silent. My greatest fear was not losing the crown, it was losing the truth behind it. To those who inherit what I leave behind, do not guard me. Guard what I believed in. The Queen Consort closed her eyes. The sound of her predecessor's voice was not accusation. It was memory. Every word carried the weight of someone who understood both love and loss. When the tape ended, she did not speak for a full minute. Then she looked up at Edric. She knew this might happen. Yes, ma'am. Camilla's voice lowered. And you, why did you not destroy it? It would have been easier, Edric answered quietly. Because the oath we take is not to the living crown. It is to the idea of it. If truth dies, then the crown dies with it. She looked away, her eyes shining faintly. My son believes he was protecting me. Perhaps he believed wrong. He believed in what he was taught, Edric said gently. But he will learn. We all must. By afternoon, news of the confrontation had begun to leak. Journalists camped outside the palace gates. The statement released by the palace was short, careful, and cryptic. An internal review of archival materials is underway. The monarchy remains committed to transparency and the preservation of historical truth. But in every newsroom, in every whispering crowd, one question burned brighter than the rest. What did the late Queen say that scared them so much? That evening, Edric returned to his quarters. A soft envelope waited on his desk. Inside was a handwritten note sealed with the royal crest. Sergeant Hail. There will always be those who wear crowns and those who defend them. Few understand that both roles are forms of service. Continue to serve the truth. CR. He folded the note carefully, placing it in his breast pocket. For the first time since dawn, he allowed himself a quiet smile. The truth had reached the throne. Whether the world would ever hear it was another battle. but one that had already begun. The oak-paneled chamber of the Parliamentary Inquiry Committee was not designed for warmth. Its high ceilings and stern portraits reminded anyone who entered that truth in this room was not a luxury, it was a demand. Rows of brass lamps cast golden pools of light over documents, microphones, and the serious faces of ministers who had gathered for what the world was already calling the archive scandal. At the far end of the table stood Sergeant Edric Hail, the man whose name had become both a symbol of integrity and a controversy the monarchy could not contain. His uniform gleamed under the light, medals polished, posture rigid. But his eyes carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had seen too much truth and too little justice. The chief investigator, Lord Henley, cleared his throat. Sergeant Hail, we are here to determine whether your actions in the lower archive violated royal confidentiality laws or upheld the late Queen's legacy of transparency. You will speak freely, but understand, every word will be recorded for both the Crown and the Commonwealth. Edric nodded. Understood, my lord. Lord Henley leaned forward. Tell us in your own words what you found. Edric took a breath. A restricted crate, unauthorized entry, and a recording, made by the late Queen herself. It contained her final instructions, directed toward those who would inherit her power. It was not political, it was moral. The room shifted slightly, whispers rising before the chairwoman struck her gavel. And did you share or distribute the contents of this recording beyond protocol? No, Edric said. The recording remains under formal custody. But it was heard by the Queen Consort. A murmur swept the chamber. Lord Henley adjusted his glasses. You admit to playing the tape without authorization from the reigning monarch? Yes, Edric replied, because the authorization already existed. From the one whose name was on the seal. A younger member of Parliament interjected sharply. You presume to interpret the will of a deceased sovereign? Edric's voice did not waver. I did not interpret it, sir. I listened. The words settled like thunder disguised as calm. Outside, reporters pressed against the gates of Westminster. The world was listening. Royal commentators debated the guard's motives on every channel. Some called him a patriot. Others whispered, traitor in uniform. Back inside, the inquiry continued. Lord Henley's tone softened slightly. Sergeant Hail, when you confronted Mr. Thomas Parker, did he resist your order? Yes. He claimed verbal permission to access the archive. Did he produce documentation? No. Did he state his purpose? Yes. He said he intended to remove a recording that could destroy the monarchy. The entire room went silent. A journalist's pen slipped from her fingers and rolled across the floor. Lord Henley's expression darkened. And you believe this recording to be authentic? I do, my lord. I authenticated the handwriting, seal, and signature, but more importantly, I recognized the voice. I guarded that voice for 21 years. The room fell still again. Then, said Lord Henley softly, you believe the late Queen foresaw what is happening now? Edric paused before answering. I believe she foresaw everything. Even this moment. The inquiry was adjourned for recess, but the decision to investigate further had already been made. As Edric exited the chamber, flashes from cameras blinded him momentarily. Reporters shouted questions. Sergeant, are you afraid of losing your title? Do you believe the palace is hiding something? Did the Queen's message accuse anyone directly? He answered none of them. Outside, the wind cut across Parliament Square, cold and honest. Standing by the steps was Major Alistair Miles, an old comrade from the Guard. You made history in there, he said quietly. I did my job, Edric replied. No, Miles said, shaking his head. You reminded them what the job used to mean. Meanwhile, inside Buckingham, chaos brewed under the silence. Queen Camilla read the preliminary transcripts of the hearing, her face pale but composed. Her advisers circled like crows around a storm. Sir Edric Hail spoke first. Your Majesty, public trust is eroding. If we do not control this narrative, Parliament will. Camilla set the papers down. Control is not the problem, Adrian. Trust is. Then what would you have us do? She looked out the window at the crowd gathering below. Perhaps for once we do not hide. Perhaps we face it. That evening, Edric returned to his quarters. The palace security code on his door had already been changed. His access revoked. But inside, a letter lay waiting on his bunk, sealed with the same red wax used in royal correspondence. He broke the seal carefully. Sergeant Hail, there are moments when the guard must protect the crown from its own silence. Tomorrow morning the Queen will summon you privately. You have earned that meeting. Colonel Davenport, Edric exhaled slowly. It was not relief. It was the sound of a man bracing for the storm's center. The next morning, the palace gates opened to a smaller motorcade. Camilla waited in the inner chamber, surrounded by none of her advisors this time. She dismissed them all at dawn. When Edric entered, she stood by the window, wearing a deep blue dress, the same color her predecessor often wore for speeches of importance. "You have made this difficult for me," she said quietly. "My duty was never meant to be easy." "Your Majesty," Edric replied. She turned to him. "Do you believe I feared the truth?" "No," he said softly. "I believe you feared what it would cost." Camilla nodded slowly. "And you, Sergeant, what does it cost you?" He paused, then said, "Peace, but not honor." Her eyes glistened faintly, though she blinked it away. "The people will never see what happens behind these walls. But I will tell you this. Your name has reminded them that truth can wear a uniform." Outside the palace that same evening, the statement to the press was brief but historic. "An independent royal commission will review all sealed recordings belonging to the late Queen Elizabeth II. Her words will not remain in silence." The crowd erupted in applause. The monarchy, for the first time in generations, had chosen light over shadow. Edric stood at the edge of the courtyard as the bell of St. George's Chapel rang through the dusk. The sound was deep, almost human, a heartbeat made of bronze and belief. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the weight lift. Even if just for a moment, history would remember him not as a rebel, but as a reminder. And sometimes, reminders are what keep truth alive. The dawn after the inquiry broke quietly over Windsor. Fog hung low around the palace gardens, softening the edges of the world. But inside the royal archives, nothing felt soft anymore. Every guard walked with sharper steps. Every archivist spoke in whispers. The silence that once protected secrets now carried fear. Fear that truth had found a way to breathe again. Sergeant Edric Hail arrived early, summoned by order of the Royal Commission. The corridors still smelled of brass polish and candle wax. He had stood in this same place for decades, guarding history, never realizing that one day history would turn around and guard him. As he approached the sealed vault, Colonel Davenport waited beside the biometric gate. "You are on record for the retrieval," the colonel said. "What we find today must go directly to Parliament. No deviations." "Yes, sir," Edric replied, scanning his hand. The lock hissed open. The vault door swung inward. Rows of catalogued reels, tapes, and sealed envelopes lined the chamber like a gallery of ghosts. Yet something looked wrong. One shelf near the corner, where the Queen's private collection rested, had a folder lying slightly out of line. Davenport noticed it too. That was not like that yesterday. Edric stepped closer. The file bore the cipher ER-2, personal addendum, and a secondary label marked confidential, playback only upon cross-testimony. Davenport frowned. Cross-testimony? That code was used only for material meant to corroborate another statement. "Another recording," Edric said quietly. They exchanged a look that said everything. Whatever they had uncovered before had not been the Queen's final word. It had been the beginning. The playback room lights dimmed as Edric inserted the second tape. Static filled the speakers for a moment before a faint, familiar voice emerged, calmer this time, softer, as if speaking not to the world, but to one person. "If this recording is ever found after the first, then the choice has already been made. I record this not for the state, but for the conscience of those who serve it. To the one wearing the red uniform, my guard, know that I trusted silence too long. And to my family, if these words ever reach you, understand that love without truth is not love at all." Davenport looked at Edric, his brow furrowed. The voice continued, trembling faintly but unbroken. "I knew my end was near. They wanted me to sign early consent, to pass authority before my time. I refused. I left instructions that my voice must remain untouched. If my family changed that order, Let history correct it, not hatred. Let truth stand where I cannot. The room fell utterly still. Davenport swallowed hard. She knew they would try. Edric's eyes lowered. And she trusted us to remember. The Queen's voice returned for one last message. To my successor, your reign will begin not when I die, but when you listen. And to my guard, if ever you must choose between your duty and your peace, choose duty. Peace belongs to those who come after. The tape clicked to a stop. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Then Davenport exhaled. We have to take this straight to the commission. No, Edric said slowly, his eyes on the silent reels. We have to take this to her. The Queen Consort? Yes, Edric said. This is not about the law anymore. It is about legacy. She must hear it before the public does. Later that afternoon, Edric and Davenport arrived at the private royal study. Camilla sat behind her desk, the afternoon sun catching the edge of her pearls. Her face was unreadable. You found something new, she said quietly. Davenport set the folder on the desk. A second recording. Her Majesty's private addendum. Camilla's expression froze. Another one. Yes, Edric said. And this one was not about succession. It was about forgiveness. She looked at him sharply. Forgiveness? Yes, ma'am. For you and for us. She did not record judgment. She recorded understanding. Camilla hesitated, her fingers tracing the wax seal. Play it. The tape rolled. The late Queen's voice filled the chamber once more, her tone now warmer, human, motherly. To the Queen who follows me, remember that power does not heal, it weighs. It is the truth beneath it that makes it bearable. Be kind to those who challenge you. They may be saving you from yourself. Camilla's hand covered her mouth. Her eyes glistened. She left this. For me? Edric nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. And to my gods, the voice continued, thank you for keeping not my walls, but my word. When the tape ended, the room remained silent except for the faint hum of the player. Camilla stood slowly, turned toward Edric and whispered, all this time. I thought she feared me, but she was warning me. Edric met her gaze. She was preparing you. Hours later, the palace released a statement, unlike any in modern history. The late Queen's final private recording has been verified. Her message, addressed to both her family and her guards, will be released publicly as part of a new exhibit, The Truth and the Crown. The monarchy reaffirms its commitment to transparency, duty, and the values Her Majesty upheld in life and beyond. News outlets across the world lit up with the story. Headlines called it The Queen's Hidden Confession. Social media flooded with one quote repeated across nations, be kind to those who challenge you. They may be saving you from yourself. It became the most shared royal message in decades. That night, standing alone in the courtyard, Edric listened as the bells of Windsor tolled in slow harmony. For the first time, they sounded peaceful, not like a warning, but like closure. Davenport joined him quietly. You realize, Sergeant, you just changed how history will remember her. Edric smiled faintly. No, sir. She changed it herself. I just pressed play. They stood there under the pale light, two soldiers no longer guarding walls, but words and the echo of a monarch whose truth had finally been heard. The bells of Windsor rang slow and steady that morning, neither mournful nor grand, but clear, like the sound of truth finally at peace. The palace courtyard shimmered under early light, the rain-washed stones reflecting the crimson of the Royal Guard uniforms assembled in perfect formation. At the center of the square, beneath the flag fluttering half-mast for remembrance, stood Sergeant Edric Hail, in full ceremonial attire for the last time. After 30 years of service, he was retiring, not in disgrace, not in silence, but in honor. The truth he had uncovered had become part of the royal record. The late Queen's final messages now rested in the Royal Archives of Transparency. A new wing opened under the Queen Consort's directive, and Edric Hail's name was inscribed on its founding plaque. To those who guard not crowns, but conscience. Yet even as he stood at attention, Edric's mind was not on the ceremony. It was on the journey that had led him here. A forged pass, a forbidden crate, a tape no one was supposed to hear, a voice from the past that refused to stay silent. He had only done his duty, Yet his duty had changed everything. The royal anthem faded. The commandant stepped forward with the folded parchment. "By royal decree," he read aloud, "Sergeant Edric Hail is hereby recognized for distinguished service to the integrity of the crown. His courage in defense of truth exemplifies the highest standard of royal duty." Every guard in the courtyard raised a salute. But when the commandant stepped aside, it was Queen Camilla herself who approached. She wore a simple navy coat, her expression calm, reflective, human. When she stopped before Edric, even the wind seemed to pause. "You changed the way we define loyalty," she said quietly. Edric bowed. "I only followed the oath I swore, Your Majesty." Her eyes softened. "No, you followed the oath we forgot." The crowd behind them stood motionless. Camilla continued, her voice steady but threaded with emotion. "The world has heard her words now, the late Queen's voice, her guidance, her forgiveness. But what the world will remember most is that a guard, standing alone, refused to let her truth die. For that, you have my respect and my gratitude." She reached into her coat pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Inside lay a golden insignia shaped like an open crown, new, gleaming, unlike any before it. "This is the Cross of Integrity, created today," she said. "It will be awarded to those who choose truth over comfort, duty over silence, and honor over fear. And it begins with you." The applause that followed was not loud. It was solemn, heartfelt, the kind of applause given not to a hero, but to a man who had quietly kept the world honest. That evening, after the ceremony, Edric walked alone along the palace's west corridor, the same path he had walked every night for 20 years. The moonlight spilled across the marble, painting soft silver lines that guided him toward the Royal Archive Wing, now renamed the Hall of Truth. He paused at the entrance. Inside, the new exhibit glowed softly, a glass case containing the Queen's 2 tapes, the sealed letters, and the handwritten note she had left behind. Truth is not a burden to be hidden. It is a light to be carried. Below the display, engraved in bronze, were the words, "Dedicated to Sergeant Edric Hail," whose silence broke so that truth could speak. He stood there for a long moment, the faint hum of the archive's climate control, whispering like the breath of history itself. Then he saluted, not to the tapes, not to the Queen's memory, but to the idea that had bound them both, duty without deception. A quiet voice came from behind him. "You should be proud, Edric." It was Colonel Davenport, older now, carrying a small box. He handed it over. "Something from the Queen," he said. Inside was a letter sealed with the royal crest. Edric broke it carefully and began to read. "Sergeant Hail, you reminded the monarchy that truth does not divide us, it defines us. You have stood between history and silence, and in doing so, you have kept faith with both. I ask one final duty of you, not as a guard but as a guide. Train the next generation to protect not the throne, but the trust that gives it meaning. Camilla R." Edric smiled faintly. "A new duty," he murmured. Davenport chuckled. "The Guard Academy will never be the same." "Then it will finally be what it should be," Edric replied. Weeks later, deep within the training grounds of Sandringham, a new class of recruits stood in formation. At the front of the line stood Captain Edric Hail, Retrau, speaking not from authority, but from conviction. "Your oath is not to the people above you," he told them, "but to the principles within you. Uniforms can change, crowns can pass, but honor remains. When the moment comes that duty and truth stand apart, you will choose truth. And when you do, you will still be guards." His words carried through the crisp air, straight into the hearts of those listening. Far away, in the royal archives, the late Queen's voice continued to rest behind glass, silent now but eternal. And beside her recording stood a small brass plaque, with one final line added by the Queen Consort herself. Truth found its guardian. Edric Hail had not just guarded a crown. He had guarded the conscience that made it worth wearing. And long after his footsteps faded from the marble halls, his story remained. A reminder that courage is not born from rebellion, but from remembrance. If you believe one honest voice can still change the world, Tell us where you're watching from. Like this video if truth and courage still matter. Subscribe to Godwatch and turn on the bell. Because stories like this remind us that even the quietest heroes can make history.